Got my coffee.
And we are on. Welcome everybody to our first Saddleback webinar of 2022, right? It's 2022. See, I don't even know. 2022. I'm Liz Mangus, literacy specialist with Saddleback Educational Publishing. Happy New Year. We're excited and kudos to you for joining us. We have Katie and Richard here. Once again, it's time for coffee with Katie and Richard. So grab your coffee mugs or your tea or whatever it is you're drinking and get ready for a great session. As usual, your control bar is on the bottom of your web browser window. That is where you can turn on the subtitles. That's where the Q&A is. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the Q&A area. But most importantly, we want you to chat with us today. So everybody do this very important thing right now. Go to the chat icon, click on it, open it up, and select. There's a little drop down there. I want you to select everyone or whatever it says that indicates that everybody who is online with us today will be receiving your chats, because otherwise whatever you type only goes into a couple of people, and that's just not very fun for Saddleback webinars. So go ahead and select everyone, say hello, let us know where you are joining us from today, and we'll be on our merry way. For subtitles, go ahead and click on live transcript and then select show subtitles, and that will activate those for you. We are on Twitter. Saddleback is on Twitter. Dr. Cash is on Twitter. Dr. McKnight is on Twitter. Hopefully you're on Twitter. Go there right now.
We're on Twitter.
Indonesia. Friend from Indonesia is on.
Oh, hello.
Good.
Yeah.
Let everybody know you are joining us today for this great session. We'll get started in just another minute or so. Hi, friends. Happy New Year. How are you?
Omaha. Wow. Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
Yeah. I'm working with Jenny and folks in Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
I think Verlaine from Arlington, Washington is going to be on. She told me she was going to be on. So we're international celebrities. Can
yes.
Bermuda. Now, Nikisha. Katie and I would love to come to Bermuda.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely.
we will blow the island up. We'll have a great time. That will be fun. McAllen, Texas.
Bermuda's on my bucket list of places that I want to visit.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've been there once. It's beautiful.
Oh,
even though it's in the Bermuda Triangle. So. Yeah.
See Debbie McGee from Killeen, Texas. I've worked at Maynard Middle School there, so it's good to see Debbie. Okay. Yay! Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed that the first week after winter break that there's this many people.
Right. I know.
I know it's really not like smart for me to say that, but it's just like I'm so impressed that this many people are along that. And that just says, commitment to our fellow educators, right?
Absolutely. And since you mentioned that, Katie, I want to give a shout out, and I know Katie.
Snow day, Sandra.
Sandra's got a snow day. A shout out to all of our teachers out there. This has not been an easy 2 years, and we're coming up on a second anniversary here. This has not been easy, and I want you to know that both Katie and I know all of the people at Saddleback really, truly appreciate the struggles that you're going through and trying to do the best for kids. And you are all our champions and with frontline workers. I mean, come on, you guys are. And so thank you so much for everything that you are doing to keep our kids safe and to keep our kids learning and developing socially and emotionally. So thank you for everything.
Yes.
Definitely.
Thanks for all that you do on behalf of kids. Mm-hmm. So our profession is the only profession that was able to Apollo 13 their profession and education in a weekend.
If I hear pivot one more time, I am going to scream.
Wait, what are you going to scream?
If I hear pivot one more time.
Oh my God. Okay.
I mean, it's kind of like the Friends episode. Pivot.
Oh my God. Well, no. Okay. Words I don't need to hear in 2022, Richard. Pivot.
Pivot.
New normal. Unprecedented. Never need to hear any of those ever again. Oh, adapt. Oh, thanks, Tim. All right. Yes.
Yeah.
Words that need to be retired from the Oxford Dictionary, the OED in 2022.
Oh,
Ugh. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to get
This is wrangling us
back
in.
on track here.
Down the squirrel hole.
Not that we're off track at all, but I always do a formal introduction of our topic, which today is teaching writing, evidence-based writing in the disciplines or content areas. So obviously Katie and Richard are here to lead this conversation. And if you don't know them, well, you should by now. So I'm just kidding. Katie and Richard, I'm not going to go through the long introduction because they're here, every 6 weeks or so on our webinar series. They are both national and international education consultants, very accomplished in what they do, authors. They both have several books, so you definitely want to check those out. This one is Richard's latest, but it's not the only one. It's Self-Regulation in the Classroom. This is Free Spirit Publishing, so check that out. He's also the author of Advancing Differentiation, so you might want to check that one out as well. And Katie, I think your latest one, I don't actually, shame on me, I don't actually have your latest one. I think it's Hands-On Grammar, but Literacy and Learning Centers for the Big Kids, among many, many other titles. And so thank you both for being here. And I'm just going to let you take it from here because I know we want to get to the content. Nobody wants to see or hear me at this point. So, all right.
Always want to listen to you. So, all right. So Liz does a very, very fine job of wrangling the presenters, right? Oops.
And Katie, you are the Empress today, and I'm going to be the Wizard of Oz. So I'm going to be behind the curtain. And anytime that you want to chime me in, just let me know. I'll be here for you.
Yeah. Well, I know you'll always have something to say.
That's for sure.
Okay. Let me share. All right. There we go. Because I can't walk and chew gum. So anyway, all right. So here we go. So kids love to argue. Teens love to argue, right? It is what they do. Bless their hearts. And so we're going to look at how do we develop evidence-based argumentation writing in the disciplines and the content areas. And I'm going to ask you, if you tweet, again, I'll enter you into a drawing for a free book. So if you go ahead and tweet us, make sure that you use the hashtag for Saddleback webinar. I think that is the official, I did look it up, and I think that's right for Saddleback. And then also tag Richard and me, and I will select a winner to get a free book. All right. So always about the free stuff. It's like that children's book. If you give a teacher a cookie. Okay. Yeah. All right. So today's agenda and focus. So why does argumentation and writing matter? Why? What's the so what for it? How does it develop student academic achievement? Develop critical thinking. So we're going to get at that. Why does it matter so much? And then strategies, like very specific strategies and ready to use writing activities. I'm all about the pragmatic. I'm all about the practical. So my goal in our hour together is that you'll walk away with a treasure trove of some very explicit things that you can use to teach evidence-based argumentation that go beyond something like ACE or race strategy. All right. So we want students to be able to write a well-reasoned claim. We want them to be able to cite and evaluate evidence. All evidence is not created equal, especially given our information age where there's so much information on the internet. There's a lot of junk out there. So kids, unlike in my I'm going to put my glasses down here, unlike in my generation, there's so much on there. When Richard and I were in college and going to school, it took more to get information into print. It really had to be vetted. But now anybody can just paste and click and it's up there. So we need kids to be able to cite and evaluate evidence more so than ever before. And then develop in writing a well-reasoned argument. And that's something that we carry in all fields, whether it's writing an evidence-based argument about Macbeth as a tragic hero, or a student who might be in a CT program who's training to be an electrician plumbing, and being able to make a cogent argument to a future client or customer about why they need to have copper piping in their house, and the argument for his services and price, his or her services or price. And then write a conclusive conclusion. And all of us as teachers, raise your hand if you've read this in a conclusion. In my essay, I have proven. All right, we want to get beyond that, but writing that conclusive conclusion, because that's the last punch that students have in their argument. And so I worked with another colleague of mine, Alan Sitomer. We call it claim it, cite it, and cement it. So claim it, cite it, cement it, the 3 C's. So we're going to go through this right now. So here's what the research says. This is the why. This is why evidence-based argumentation is so prominent in your state standards or in your country standards, and why we promote it. Evidence-based writing is the heart of critical thinking. And I know Richard's going to want to say something. When students have an understanding of the components of an argument and are able to closely examine texts or different content, not necessarily text, and identify evidence, they are engaging in that deep critical thinking. That's George Hillock's, Jerry Graff, Donald Graves. I could keep going down the list. There's so many that keep proving this over and over and over again. And Richard, I see your camera on, so you can put in your 2 cents.
Yes, I'm going to say that, we're all born critical thinkers. That's just a natural baseline for us. But that's critical thinking about making sure to escape the saber-toothed tiger or the, post-dinosaurs, right? Well, that's at a survival level. Critical thinking, what we're talking about here, is looking at a reasoned point of view and thinking through what is not being said, what has not been written, what is not being declared. It's more than just analyzing the text and saying, is the text true or false? It's really looking through the information and trying to disaggregate the various biases that may be inherent in it. And you know what, I don't want to keep going on, because, by the way, that's our next webinar with Saddleback. It's going to be about critical thinking. So I'm going to pause right there and say yes.
Yes, and all right. And so let's take that claim it first. So the first is how well do our students make claims? So getting it down to that, and having kids really understand what it means to lay claim to a text. And one of the things that my experience has been, and again, all of this is with my co-creator, Alan Sitomer, is that identifying claims versus a statement, of making sure that kids understand the difference between a claim and a statement. So what Alan and I really set out to do in Claim It, Cite It, Cement It is to really break it down and not make this assumption that kids just know this, but teaching it deliberately and having it into these structures. And so one of the other things too is PQA. Some of you might be familiar with this, is that putting the question in an answer. So whatever question or prompt is posed, of teaching kids to be able to put that in the response. And from a very pragmatic point of view, that's what we're looking for all the time on standardized tests, is that students are actually answering the question. And then honing in on a highly reasonable claim. That's another thing too. All claims are not created equal. Some of them are more reasonable than others. And when you make a claim, is it something that you can actually defend? Can you actually defend it with evidence? And then on richly expressed claims, there's got to be some robustness to it. It's got to be worth investigating and exploring. And then well-written claims as well. So we want students to be able to develop that competency of being able to write a really outstanding claim. So here's an activity that I like to use with students that Alan and I developed. And it's in our work Short, Short, Big. You can go to our website, shortshortbig.com, and we have more on there. There's a very robust sample that's on there, and that you can download. It's available to you. And the other thing too is that Saddleback Publishing, I'm going to give them a shameless plug. They were completely generous for us when we were developing our program. It was our pandemic project that they provided the source text for us. So the source text is highly rich and engaging. It has substance to it for kids to respond to and to write about it. So the learning target for this activity, and this would be in the cited section, so teaching kids how to write claims, is that we want kids to understand the difference between claims and statements, so that once they start composing and they complete short writes, they will know how to start their compositions off on the proper foot. So for instance, vegetarians don't eat meat. Is that a claim or a statement? Movies are more entertaining than YouTube videos. Well, that's obviously a claim. Vegetarians don't eat meat. That's a statement. That's a fact, right? And that's something that I find in working with teenagers in particular, making sure that they understand the difference between a statement or a fact and then actually a claim, like something that you can have an opinion about. So here's another way of looking at it in this two-part organizer, is that a statement is a fact that can be proven to be true. So you can't change a fact. A fact is a fact is a fact is a fact. And you can't argue a fact. So I have brown eyes. Katie has brown eyes. That's a fact. I mean, I could change them with color context, but I couldn't change them naturally or organically. And then a claim or an opinion describes how I feel. I feel that brown eyes are far more beautiful to blue eyes. And so it's about feelings or beliefs. So that's why I always tip students about is that look for those feelings, those beliefs, cue phrases like I believe or I think. Yep. Richard, what you got?
Green eyes are much sexier than brown eyes.
Yeah, there's your 2 cents, right? So we're going to see a video. I'm going to show you a short video, and this is based on George Hillock's work, and it's in his book, Teaching Argumentation and Writing. Really wonderful book. And he talks about the critical thinking aspect of evidence-based argumentation. And one of the things that he likes to do, and I use this all the time in classrooms, is he likes to use pictures or he likes to use videos. So I'm going to show you a really short, like 90-second video, and it's about zombie fungus. And I'd like you to make 2 statements, facts that cannot be revoked, about the zombie fungus video. And then I want you to identify at least 2 claims that you could make about this video. And if you could go ahead and just put that in the chat area, like here are 2 statements or facts, or here's a claim, just so we know. So, like claim and then colon, and then give it to us, and then a statement or fact, and then colon, that would be great. But go ahead and type in the chat area while we're watching this video, statements or a claim that you can make from this video. So here we go.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungle.
Whoop, oh, sorry about that. I hit the mouse and super sensitive. So let's do a redo. There we go.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungles. Few are more successful than the ants. There can be 8 million individuals in a single hectare. But jungle ants don't have it all their own way. These bullet ants are showing some worrying symptoms. Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Then, utterly disorientated, it grips a stem with its mandibles. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony. It seems extreme, but this is the reason why. Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head. It can take 3 weeks to grow, and when finished, the deadly spores will burst from its tip. Then any ant in the vicinity will be in serious risk of death. The fungus is so virulent, it can wipe out whole colonies of ants. And it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer. There are literally thousands of different types of cordyceps fungi, and remarkably, each specializes on just one species. But these attacks do have a positive effect on the jungle's diversity, since parasites like these stop any one group of animal getting the upper hand. The more numerous a species becomes, the more likely it will be attacked by its nemesis, a cordyceps fungus.
Okay.
Incredibly, 80%.
So there's fungus among us. Okay.
Oh my gosh, Katie, could you not have gotten a more disgusting?
It's really funny because the scientists are always like, oh my gosh, that's really so cool. And then other people are like, oh no, it's so gross. And but we want something that's engaging. So think about the teenager that you're teaching. Would they be interested in that? And every time I've shown that to teenagers, they're like, whoa, they just can't get over it. So I love the idea. M. Kim said, use sentence stems such as I think, in my opinion, I agree or disagree. Yes, 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 absolutely. And so I see that most of you have lots of different facts in here about, 80% of insects live in jungles. Spores are worrying. I love that. Spores are a little concerning. It seems extreme claim. Yeah. And then quickly taken away. So we would do this with students and populate this T-chart and looking at the difference between facts and statements. And one of the other things that I like to do with students is that I'll give them two claims. Like two claims that I'm thinking about are zombie fungus can be detrimental to an ecosystem or detrimental to grasshoppers, or it could be beneficial to an ecosystem. And again, I love the fact that it's a visual that students are using, because we want to basically train that muscle for critical thinking and analysis of I can make a claim and here's my evidence and I consider my evidence. Because how many of us have read papers where students just quote dump or evidence dump? Science teachers, it drives them nuts that students will just data dump, but they don't relate it back to their hypothesis, which is their claim when they're writing science reports. So we want kids to be able to start distinguishing and making clear what these nuances are. And as teachers, we need to teach it deliberately. So, Richard.
Katie, I have a question. Would it be advantageous for teachers to have students look at transcripts such as this and look for language that is finite, can, will, must, and language that is not so finite, like seems, like it seems worrying. Well, seems is debatable, right?
Yes.
Or in my opinion. So again, going back to what Kim said, breaking it down by the language, as long as they can identify certain words in the statement, then they can say if it has these words that are debatable words, or if it has a finite word to it. Finite means that it's a fact. Debatable means it's an opinion or it's a claim. So,
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And then they're just keywords to look for. But there's always this assumption, and this is what Alan and I were working on too. It's like, what do you do when you have middle school students, high school students who still are not understanding what a claim really is? And it has to be taught deliberately. It's got to be a concrete kind of model for it, because that's one of the challenges with writing, is that there are structures to it and there's modeling that can be done, but there's quite a bit of a thing, like the fuzzy part of it too, of what really tone means. And I love it when students write, in my essay, I have proven, and they restate the thesis. Well, they did exactly what I told them to do, restate the thesis. So I can't fault them on that. But how do you explain to them what a conclusive conclusion is? And that's what Alan and I really strove for on this, is how do we take the ambiguity out of evidence-based argumentation and writing? How do you take the ambiguity out of it so it's easier for us to teach and easier for students to understand and learn, and then start developing that and putting that into practice? So so you're nodding your head, Richard. Do you have anything else to say?
No, I'm just glad that I'm smarter than I look. So that's good. That's good.
Even though you have green eyes, but
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so here's another one too, is that put the question in the answer. I know many of you do this too as teachers and teaching students evidence-based argumentation and writing, is that it's a surefire way of really making sure that your claim can be understood. So we want, that's one of the things I remember as a high school student. I used to get comments on my paper all the time of coherence. And once I finally had a clear understanding of what coherence meant, I was like, well, it makes perfect sense to me, and I don't know why it doesn't make sense to the reader. So how do we bridge that gap too? So we want to make sure that our reader understands the question that I'm answering and the claim that I'm making. So why is it so important? Well, imagine if you read this. Student just writes chocolate sauce, whipped cream, and sprinkles. Well, as a reader, you have no idea what they're talking about, right? But I would understand if we say 3 popular toppings that kids like to put on ice cream are chocolate sauce, whipped cream, and sprinkles. And I think some of it is just, developmentally, they want to take the shortcut. I've got to add that extra language to make sure that my reader understands what the point of focus, the point of concentration is my writing. So it makes sense, right? So here are some more examples for students. And I would give these to students. So what are 3 toppings kids like to put in ice cream? That's the question. An incorrectly state claim would be this. A student is just responding to it, assuming that the reader has the question. But they don't have the question. The reader just has your essay, your response. And so I want to make sure that I have a correctly stated claim of 3 popular toppings, as I said before. What's your favorite color? Blue. My favorite color is blue. What is your favorite vegetable to eat? Broccoli. My least favorite vegetable is broccoli. So kids start seeing that because the question is in there, then the reader is going to understand it if it's not in context, if it's taken out of context. So here's some more. So why does that matter? Well, that's a great question. And, teenagers would ask that question. It's like, why does it matter? Why do I have to do it that way? When you use the wordage, when you use the words in from the question in your answer, it's not cheating. Some students might think that. I've heard students say that. It's actually what strong writers do. Strong writers make sure that their reader is able to follow along what they have in text. So the 2 most important reasons are, if I restate the question in the answer, a writer provides context for the reader. And this is really important. And it helps limit your claim to only 1 strong sentence. So I would just do this as an opener at the beginning of class, of having them respond to those questions and then doing that. So when they're posed a question or a prompt, whether it's on a standardized test or it's a question that they're posed in class, whether it's written, verbal, however, that they can always be able to make that stand. I can put the question back in my response and develop a claim that has one strong sentence. So this is where economy of language is a really helpful thing, okay? We want one strong sentence. So here's what the research says. This is from Dick Allington and Rebecca Gabriel. So practice is critical, and it's about building these habits for good writing. So in a gradual release of responsibility framework, the idea is for students to have ample practice time. I know Richard's going to want to speak to this in order to develop skills and knowledge, because he writes about this quite a bit with student self-regulation. This is especially important in light of his research about schools that are able to close the achievement gap in literacy. I would say that that is the number one thing that I see as an outsider coming into classrooms, having supervised literally hundreds of student teachers in my university career. The number one comment that I always give on feedback is you need to model. You need to be explicit. We can't assume that they know. Even if they know how to make a claim in an ELA class, if they make a claim in my class or in Richard's class, there might be something specific that I might have in my expectations. Or even if I have on a rubric where I say, you need to have 3 pieces of strongly worded evidence, oftentimes they don't relate it back to their claim or their thesis, and they just quote dump or they just evidence dump. And all of us have read that writing. Every single one of us. You've probably already read it 100 times this year. Yeah, Richard, what you got?
You know what I'm going to say here about the GRR, the gradual release of responsibility. I really think we need to flip that on its head, not call it gradual release of responsibility, but call it the gradual release of control. When teachers are in control of everything, students don't develop responsibility. So in this gradual release of control, in the very early stages of that is modeling. You're controlling everything. Then in that next stage, which is then the copying stage, which is that early practice where I'm going to be supporting you, you're letting them go a little bit with guardrails. In that third stage of the gradual release of control, they're in practice where I'm standing back, I'm more of a coach, a guide on the side, no longer the sage on the stage. Where ultimately they have the most responsibility is when they do it themselves, and I am there as a consultative or as a voice to help them become more independent. So I'm really wanting to change that from the gradual release of responsibility to the gradual release of control, because same in my experience of hundreds and hundreds of teachers, is that when teachers take the control in the classroom, and the reason they take control in the classroom is because they are afraid of what kids will do.
Yes.
And when they are fearful of what kids will do, they try to control it. When anyone is controlled, whether you're controlled physically, when you're controlled mentally, you stop learning. You go into a downshift and you go into that lower part of your brain and you're in survival. When you have options, when you have opportunities, when you have the responsibilities, your own control, you are more likely to learn. So,
Yes, exactly.
There's
and
my piece.
And it's connected. And yes, exactly. Okay. All right. Thanks, Richard. And then, so let's go on to give you some examples for Claim It. Now I want to talk about Cite It. And so for Cite It, I'm just going to move my chat box over so I can see my screen, actually see my slide. So what does it mean to cite and evaluate evidence? And then how to properly quote evidence or cite evidence? And then how to properly paraphrase evidence. These are all skills that we need when we use citation to support our claim. And then Kim, you said this too about sentence starters. And I'm glad that you said that. It was a great plant for me, because we want to model lots of sentence starters. So if I were writing about this claim, this might be something that I do. And it's okay if students copy what you've done, because that's where they're at right there. And I know Richard talks about that too, as far as that's where they are as far as their stage. The first is model, observe, copy in 2, Copy and do, practice and refinement, independence and application. So if they're copying my sentence starter exactly, and then doing that, that's fine. That is just fabulous, because I want them to get into that habit. And I'm using that model to build the habit so it becomes innate. And I always say that strategies are great, but when students know when and how to use the strategy because they built it into a habit, that's awesome. That's when we are like the most awesome teachers ever. And then honing in and citing relevant evidence, and citing strong evidence. All evidence is not created equal. All right, so here is an activity that we can use to hone those skills. So my learning target is to make sure that students understand what evidence actually is, because I still encounter that. I could see middle school, even high school students who really don't understand when something is evidentiary or not, why evidence is important, why it matters, and the difference between strong and weak evidence. So one of the things too, a lot of writing programs do this, and there's a reason why as far as color coding. So you notice that I always have claim it is in blue. It says what you know. Cite it is always green. It says how you know it. That's the reasoning part of it. And cement it is always orange. It says why I know this. So what you know, how I know it, and why I know it are really the three components. So as we look at this even more, strong evidence versus weak evidence. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a really good question here from Barbara. How is it best to break the habit of copying text? Because she's finding that her students came from, it is not as big a deal as it is here in the United States to just copy text. And my suggestion would be that you start limiting how much, again, the gradual release of control. How much am I giving you that you can keep relying upon? So that you have to gradually start taking it away from them so they have to support themselves. So no longer giving them the sentence stem, maybe giving them one or two words in it, like an open statement where a few words are there, not the whole thing. So
are we talking about copying from the teacher, or are we talking about plagiarizing from an original source?
I'm assuming that it's copying the text, copying it exactly the way from what the teacher had written.
Yeah, I would agree with you, exactly what you're saying, and then start weaning them off of it, or maybe even having like a couple of blank lines that they complete with like an initial cue word and an end word. Yeah.
And then Kim is talking about plagiarism because in the other M, Kim is saying plagiarism is not a vice in East Asian educational settings. And some of that I would suggest is because of the fear possibly for EL students of not having a sophistication with the structure of English language. And that might be the crutch they need at that moment. But I think you have to start pulling away the scaffolds. So they have to, and Kim, I agree with you that it's all about plagiarism, even American-born students, because it is so easy to cut and paste. What you have to do is show them that you can run this stuff through those plagiarism apps that you have, and that this is not acceptable. I can't take it because it's illegal in the United States. Illegal.
Well, yeah. Well, you'll get thrown out of college, things like that. So a couple of things on this. Here's the first thing: is that I always, all behavior is communication. So when students are engaging in the behavior of plagiarism, it's communication. So what is the student telling me? They don't have confidence, or they don't have the skill set yet to be able to paraphrase and put it into original language to support their claim. So I want to assume the best about them. So there's a couple of things. One, lots and lots and lots of models. So here it is, you took it directly from the text. I wouldn't even say, you're going to have to go to plagiarism jail for 10 years. What I would say is like, okay, so you plagiarize that. And so this is where you are right now in the draft. It's not what we do. That's not what good writers do. Good writers don't plagiarize. they have original text. Here's how I would put it in original text. And you give it to them as an example. And keep providing those models, and perhaps giving students exercises of, here is an evidentiary paragraph, put it in your own words that you could use in an argument that you're making. And you can have students even work in pairs in that, but give them a model first. What is your expectation? And then how do they do it? Rather than punishing and shaming, as far as like, you plagiarized, you get an F on your paper. Because I see a lot of that. They need to know why, and then be able to develop the habit to not do it. There is a fantastic strategy that I love for summarizing and paraphrasing text, and it's called GIST. GIST, and go check it out. But basically what students do is they skim the text first, and you could use this as a morning warm-up with your students or at the opening of class to get them into that rhythm of being able to take text and be able to paraphrase and summarize it in their own words, and to do it competently. So just what it is essentially is that they scan the text, they write down key phrases or words, then they read the text, and then they write an exactly 20-word summary of that text. And what it teaches students to do is to really hone in on what's most important and what's most relevant. That's the critical thinking muscle that makes this kind of academic work worthwhile, and why it matters. Yeah, Richard.
I got a fun activity that I do with that, and I call it a tweet. Because you can only do it in 144 characters. And so you have to make a tweet. Take this and tweet it. And so use the technology that the kids are used to. You can't put the whole thing in there. Tell me what this is about in a tweet.
Exactly. Which is, another is GIST. It's the same kind of concept. Okay, so here's our 3-step thought process. When we hear a claim, even if it's rock solid, we typically go through a 3-step evaluation process in our heads. This is what we typically do as human beings. We reflect on the claim, checking to see if we understand it. It's like, does this make sense? And then we evaluate the claim against our own beliefs. Richard already gave a great example of that, where I said, brown eyes are the most beautiful of all eye color. And he's like, no, green are. So he challenged that claim against his own belief, and then decide, is that a claim that's worth supporting? Is that worth arguing yes or no? And then when we cite relevant, strong, accurate evidence, it can really be a difference maker in whether or not the claim eventually wins support. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. And all, you can go check out the website shortshortbig.com. And so here's my student claim. My parents should be giving me a higher allowance. Well, this is weak student evidence, is that I want more money so I can buy a bunch of cool stuff. And then another one, so here it is again, with stronger evidence. Now that I'm in 4th grade and do more chores and have continued to do very well in school, it only makes sense that they give me more money than they gave me when I was in 1st grade. It's a stronger evidentiary argument because of the nuances to it. So the stronger the evidence, the higher the likelihood that an audience will support the claim. So just because, I would say that, the first one, that weak student evidence is like the response of like, because, that's not very strong. More detailed, the more precise, the more relevant it is, the more likely you are to support your argument. Okay, so again, with that color coding, the claimant says what you know, and the cite it, green, says how you know it. So going forward, in the presentation, I'm going to be using this color coding system, so it's more easy to remember, what component of the argument we're looking at. So here's an example. So we want to determine if the evidence that's being cited supports the claim. Is it strong or weak? So this is what I mean by discerning how strong or weak the evidence is. So that first one is, I deserve a new tennis racket. Okay, so that's my claim because it's in blue. The one I currently have is old and ugly, and I really don't want one. So in the chat area, what's your vote? Do you think it's strong or do you think it's weak? Yeah, everyone's saying it's weak, right? So it's weak because it's kind of like, well, so what? It doesn't really give a lot of detail. It sounds like a whiner, right? Like a teenager just kind of whining about something. So look at the next one. So it's a smart idea that the school makes sure to teach its students about the value of recycling and plastic on campus. Well, just alone, that claim is worth arguing, right? It's a much meatier one rather than I just deserve a new tennis racket. Like I would say to students, like newer tennis rackets are superior to older ones when playing tennis. And then I might say something like the strings are bouncier or the racket is stronger or something like that. But according to lead environmental experts, when young people learn about the positive impact of recycling as children, the amount of non-recyclable waste they produce as adults is reduced by 63%. Okay, so this is strong evidence. Why is this strong evidence as opposed to number one? And it's a really key answer. Go ahead and put it in the chat. Why is 2 stronger evidence than 1? What's the difference between those? Yeah, 1 is opinion. And Richard, this is your line. What do you always say about opinions?
Opinions are like passing gas. We all have them and most of them stink. So, so there.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody is saying, the second part that, right. It's details, using authoritative sources. Of course, if I cite it and use parenthetical notation or whatever, it's going to make it even stronger by doing that. And it's an expert opinion. It's not like, because I want one, right. Or, whatever. And it's like, that's great, but yeah,
again, I think
a lot of passing gas going on.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, again, giving kids vocabulary. If you can go back a slide there, using vocabulary to define relativeness, old and ugly. That's a relative term.
Yeah.
Old compared to what? Ugly compared to what? But when you've got, reduces by 63%, that's a fact. You've got evidence to show that. So I think, again, going back to all of the sessions, Katie, that you've done on vocabulary, I think it is incumbent upon us to teach terminology at this point to say, what is a relative term as compared to what? That I think is a really critical part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And vocabulary, for it to stick, is about it being contextualized just like that. So I'm deliberately choosing this word and explaining to students why I'm choosing this word, because it's more precise and it carries more of my meaning, and letting them know what it means. That is more likely to stick than if I have them write the words 3 to 5 times and write down a definition. That has been proven over and over and over, just like using tobacco causes cancer. It does not work, and we still do that. So I model, and then I give kids the opportunity. So then this exercise, does that, where I want them to write their claim, and then what the green is going to be for evidence. So it's the I do, we do, I do, we do, you do, guided practice. So I modeled and kids observed. Now and then they're going to use that model and start practicing and honing their skills to develop well-reasoned claims and providing relevant evidence. Okay, so here's another example. This is from Saddleback. I got to give them a nice plug, and it comes from one of their books, Incredible Comebacks, and it's about Serena and Venus Williams. And so it's a highly engaging text for kids to read, very interesting. That's what Saddleback does. And what they're going to do is the students are going to look at a question. Is it sometimes a good idea for athletes to take a break? And so we're going to use that PQA strategy and put the question in the answer, and then provide textual evidence. So notice that I'm being consistent. I'm always using blue for claim. I'm always using green for the evidence and the citation, and making sure that I provide a very strong, concrete example and then have my students then do it. I'm setting them up for success. And, as we mentioned in the chat and already, if students need a little bit of a sentence stem to do that, sure, give it to them and then gradually wean them away from it as well. And you can see that there's multiple claims that I could make from just that one text. There's quite a bit that I could use from there. Okay. So lots of examples. So, here's what the research says. This isn't all a bunch of make 'em ups. I'm a pragmatic gal. I want to make sure that what I'm doing actually is working. So the National Institute for Literacy has done multiple white papers and research studies, and writing skills don't develop in a vacuum. You're not like born with it or not born with it. They need to be deliberately taught. So not only is writing a method for communication and expression, it's a huge learning tool. And that goes back to the work of Jim Britton back in like the late 70s and 80s, and writing for thinking and writing for learning. So researchers have found, without a doubt, that student writing, like reading, actually increases their capacity to learn. I can't emphasize this enough. And let me just say this right now. Please, please, please promise me right now that you will not grade every piece of writing that students do. Okay, because then you will never have your Saturday night ever for your lover. So please don't do that. And it's about building habits in students to actually write. And I'm going to say this right now. I am not a confident writer. Richard knows this about me. I've written 20 books. I write all the time, but I still lack confidence in my writing. And it really stems back to my high school years, when I was taught that there was an assumption that I knew how to write, and I didn't, and it wasn't taught deliberately to me. How did I learn how to write? I learned how to write by writing more, and I was lucky enough that I had a couple of professors in college who really took the time to model for me and sit down with me and show me actually how to do it. And then when I was in graduate school, I just started writing more. And now, because I'm always writing, I get better at it because I just do more of it. The other thing too is I think that made me a better writing teacher when I taught high school, and also teaching teachers to teach writing, is that we've got to take the ambiguity out of teaching writing and being really concrete and clear. And I'll be the first person on the platform today that when I was in teacher school and I was a student and I took my methods of teaching English course, I was really not taught how to teach writing. I think I had maybe 2 class sessions on how to teach writing. And then when I taught that course as a professor, I actually advocated for having an entire course just on teaching writing at the middle school and high school level, because it is a skill set as specific as it is for elementary teachers of methods of teaching reading. They need a whole course just on that baby. And it's separate from English language arts because there's so much to it. So as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about it. So and we can't blame the victims. So that's what Alan and I really worked on during the pandemic on this is, and I agree, Beatrice, yes, that teaching writing on the middle school and secondary level requires continuous learning. And I think because we didn't have it, and a lot of us are not confident about it, also teaching grammar, that we may not pay as much attention to it and that we're not as precise. So National Writing Project, of course, I want you to go to Short, Short, Big and look at our materials. And I would love for you to look at our sample and give us feedback, because it really came out of that organic need in classrooms and what Alan and I kept seeing and what we experienced. But National Writing Project, I love National Writing Project. They are fabulous. Yes,
I'm going to cut in here. I got 2 things.
Yeah.
Number one, when you talked about the insecurity of writing, writing is such a emotional thing, because you are presenting yourself to the audience.
There's a vulnerability.
There's a vulnerability there, whether you make spelling errors or whether you make syntax errors or whatever. The error is usually what they hone in on. So teachers are always correcting the error, not necessarily praising what you're doing well. And so when I was learning to write, same. I've written only 3 books and a dissertation and many articles, but again, I'm constantly in fear of being exposed, and it's that imposter syndrome. I can't be this smart because I can't write, and that's not necessarily true. So because it is such an emotional thing, so I think what we have to do is turn that on its head as well and stop grading the bad things.
Yep.
Stop pointing out what's bad.
Let's evaluate effort. Yeah.
Yes.
Where were you at the beginning? And then where did your final draft wind up? That's what we're really looking at it.
Right.
And
focus on the positives.
Yeah, exactly.
The strength-based affirmative way of teaching. Another thing here, Maria asked this a couple minutes ago.
Okay, because I've got about 5 minutes and I got one more chunk. Okay.
When you claim it and cite it, is that then called a statement?
No, statements and claims are different. So at the very beginning, if you look at the originals, the first couple of slides, I want students to be able to discern the difference between a statement and a claim, because statements are not claims. So you have your claim, and then the cited is you are exploring that claim and you're discussing that claim and presenting your evidence as your argument to prove that claim. And Beatrice, there's 2 things that you said where I'm like, yes. The whole notion of formulaic writing, so creating versus producing. And I think in school, we're very much into producing rather than creating. I used to teach all the plumber kids when my 3rd year teaching. I had all the plumbing kids, and we actually did evidence-based argumentation where I said, you need to give an estimate. You can do anything that you want as far as how you're going to repair the plumbing in this house, and make a claim about it and provide evidence. So, we had so much fun about it. And, some of my kids, they're like, well, no, you need to route it this way. And it's going to be more expensive because you have to dig this trench, because if you do it this way, the cheap way, it's likely that your toilet water is going to wind up in your dishwasher. And I learned more about plumbing than I ever thought I would in my entire life, but it was relevant. Am I teaching the same skills and teaching argumentation? Yes, but I don't need to use Macbeth to do that. Okay. And it's really about thinking. We use evidence-based argumentation every day in a democratic society. Okay. Every single day we use it. And then Beatrice, you said something else too, is that that feedback has to be restorative. Amen, sister. So thank you for saying that feedback is never in a letter or grade. It's about how do you get to that next level. Okay, so I want to get to cement it real quick here. Okay, so cement it is being able to write that conclusive conclusion. So we're not just restating the thesis of, in my essay, I have proven that Macbeth is a tragic hero. Okay, no. That's like you're putting your final stake in the ground, okay? And we want people to walk away. We want your reader to walk away and go, oh, okay. And that you've really done a great job. So a well-reasoned conclusion, a conclusive conclusion, and cementing it. Okay, so here's an exercise. So what does it mean? So when we're looking at short response writing, I'm going to kind of skip through this slide because I want to get to this, okay? Is that here's this example, okay? Halloween candy sales are a booming business. That's my claim. According to the National Confectioners Association, great evidence, it's from an authority. And then I quote, then we have my conclusion. The large amount of money that gets spent on candy every Halloween explains why so many supermarkets have gigantic promotions. So what I would do with students is I would show them this and I'd say, here's a weak conclusion. Here's a lousy conclusion. I'm going to be like, yeah, so what? If I just say, and so Halloween candy sales are a booming business, or you can make a lot of money selling candy. It doesn't have that same oomph to it. And what gives it the oomph to it is that I have a final statement about it. So I basically have reasoned this out and say that the large amount of money that gets spent on candy every Halloween explains why so many supermarkets, like it's another realization. It's something that I can add on, that I can give the reader as a takeaway. And then here's another one too, another example of what I mean by conclusive conclusion. And I think that conclusive conclusions are really hard to write. And why are they hard to write? I'm really glad that you asked that question. They're hard to write because it requires a higher level of cognition, a higher level of comprehension. It goes into that inferential level of comprehension. That's why they're more challenging, but that's also where the stickiness of learning is. We want learning to be sticky. So they need copious examples of and how to do that. So I also included in here another exercise that you can take a look at. This again is a Saddleback text. So when I have my cite it, just like I did with cite it, I have my claim. I use the PQA strategy. So why do snakes bite people? Snakes bite people in self-defense, okay? That is my claim. And then according to the article, I'm referring back to my text, my source, people pose a danger and snakes just want to be left alone, okay? I pulled that from the text. So, and then I want to tie that claim and evidence with logical reasoning. So that's how I would do it. So this is what how we break it down. If you have like a success period or MTSS and working with writing, and you have students that don't have the basics of writing down, this is basically a flow chart that we developed and how to get this into 10 weeks of just really breaking it down. And each one of these underneath claim it, cite it, cement it, where, you know, like what it means to lay claim to a text, identifying claims, all of that can be aligned with standards that you have for your district, your school, your state, your country, whatever that might be, because I know we're international. I want to give a big shout out to Saddleback. These are the source texts that we use, lots of great informational text that's highly engaging for kids to read, that are awesome to develop evidence-based argumentation writing on. So short writes, short reads, short writes, big gains. And that's something else too that Alan and I found, like when we developed this and piloted it in schools pre-pandemic, we were seeing big movement as far as reading comprehension and writing achievement. So if you want to learn more about it, go check us out on shortshortbig.com. And we have a really robust sample that you can download. And there's lots of exercises and samples in my handouts and notes. So, okay. So it's 4:00 Eastern time on the dot. We can hang out for a little bit more. I'm sure Liz will come on now and we can take some more questions, comments, things that you might have about that.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody for your participation today. There's really good energy in this webinar, really good participation, and a great presentation too, obviously. So this was definitely a fun one. So thank you everybody for your attention and your engagement today. I feel like we got through to most of the questions as they came in. Richard was really jumping in and making sure to tackle those. So if you have any additional questions, we have a couple more minutes, so just go ahead and type those in. I don't suspect we'll get too many more, but
I'm sorry to interrupt, Liz, but Katie, one of the very first statements at the beginning was a question about, have you heard about writing is thinking?
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's Jim Britton's work. Yeah.
Okay, so you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's Jim Britton's work. Don Murray, Don Graves, a lot of folks.
All your buddies.
Movement in the 70s and 80s. Jerry Graff. I say, they say. Yep.
Got it. Good. Okay. Yeah. No, a lot of good feedback in there, and also what I was really thankful for is that people were throwing in all kinds of other suggestions. So along with the recording, is there a transcript of the chat, Liz?
Yes, we can. Good. For those who need it, we can get that to them. Sure. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of folks were asking too. I showed very quickly that time, you know, the claim it, cite it, cement it. One of the things that, you go on our website, I will say this, is that every single thing that we developed in the sequence are actual activities, exercises, instruction that we've actually done in classrooms, either Alan and I have. So when you look at the teacher's guide, and you'll see this in the sample, we have a clock there that says how long we think it should take. Mm-hmm. And of course, every context is different, but we've done this in many, many different classrooms. And Alan was a former California teacher. Well, he still has the title. He's still, even though he got it 15 years ago, California Teacher of the Year. And he worked in LAUSD, Los Angeles Public Schools. And so when we give that time on there, they're very similar to classrooms like yours, so all different kinds of classrooms, private, public, international, everything you could possibly imagine. So that time is what our guesstimate has been and our experience has been. Because I think that's really helpful, because if you're in a block where you have 90 minutes and this takes 15 minutes, you can plan and figure out where that's going to go in your block. If you have a full class period, like 45 minutes dedicated to writing, okay, this is my first chunk, my second chunk, my third chunk in my 45-minute block. So it's like Legos.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions and your participation once again. Next week's webinar is actually on Tuesday, so it's only just a few days away. This is a little bit different. We normally do Thursdays. So heads up, Carly Spina will be here next week on Tuesday, January 11th. At 3:00 Eastern Time. She has a new book out. If you didn't know, check it out. It's called it's Moving Beyond, I think it's called, right? Carly, I think Carly was here. So Carly, you can chime in the chat. So this is going to be a very timely webinar on getting inspired, staying inspired, and what do we do just to get beyond inspiration, especially for our multilingual learners. Moving Beyond for Multilingual Learners, that's the title. Great. So come and learn more about this on Tuesday. We'd love to see you all back here. And thank you to Richard and Katie. This was a great session, and we'll see you in February. We'll have you back on for the next Coffee with Katie and Richard. Maybe next time I will actually bring my coffee. I left it in the kitchen this time, so. Oops. That's all right, though. All right. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next time, and everybody have a great evening. Take care.
Yes. Happy New Year. For all you do. Thanks.